Hope I don't step on the cat. Oh, you lost your microphone there, Tony. Yeah, I think the cat got you. That cat will get you quick. We'll do a little adjustment. Okay, here we are. We got 27 people here waiting for us.
All right.
Yeah, we'll get into this pretty quick. I'm going to crank up the phone so I can see some comments. We got them flying in. We got a friendly cat that wants to climb up my guest's leg right now. Jason C. from the Army is saying loud and clear. Thanks, Jason, for letting me know. Now you're on my leg, Kitty. Hi, Kitty. It's good to see you. You've been avoiding me the last couple of videos. A lot of thumbs ups coming in. All right, you want to have a good look at the camera. Let's take a look. Everybody wants to see the kitty. There you go. Now, you're going to have to go find the mouse. All right, tonight, my guest, Tony Rajenovich. Did I say it right?
Yeah, thanks.
Rajenovich.
Yeah,
perfect. Good to see you, Tony. Thanks for being on.
Thanks, Chris. Glad to be here.
I appreciate that. So tonight we're going to talk about some pretty important things. Like I said, I got the phone running. I can see comments as they come in. I see Bill Gerlach is on here. I see Patrick Forrester's on here. Chris Olson. Brian Waters is on here. Jason C., like I already said. We also have Nice and Meat on here, who is a moderator, so he's going to watch after comments. Tonight's topic can be a little controversial, and I'll say this first and foremost, that what we do talk about or what Tony's views are do not directly represent or may not directly represent the views of this channel, okay? Just because we talk about something, what you say I might not agree with, and what I say you might not agree with. But we just got to put that out there so everybody understands that. But tonight's topic is important. We're going to talk about the consent decree. You seem to be, everybody I called seemed to steer me towards you. Either they didn't want to talk on the camera, or you were the man, or both. I don't know. But you're from the Coalition for, the Coalition for the Great Lakes.
The Coalition to Protect Michigan Resources.
That's a great thing. You're the director of that, correct?
I was voluntold to be the president.
Yeah, I've been there once or twice myself. Yeah, it's funny how that works out. But it's a great thing to have you here, Tony. I really do appreciate it. But we're going to set some rules and standards to begin with. Like I said, Nice on Mead's on here. He's a moderator. We're not going to have any trash talking. This is not an open hate group. This is not a place for you to come on here and just be an idiot. Remember the word idiot from Looney Tunes?
Yeah.
I still say that. Don't come on here, though, and be that guy or that girl and just run your mouth over something that you don't understand. Don't come on here and just try to cause problems. Don't troll it. Anything that's done that way, I can't ban one person like as we're going, so it's going to be that old adage, one person can ruin it for the rest of you. So everybody play fair. Everybody keep their comments above water, and we'll have a nice conversation. I think we can manage that.
That'll work for me.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. All right, we got a lot of people rolling in here. Chris Olson giving me a lot of thumbs up. Eric Nearing's here. Steve Steele as well. A lot of Army members. That's good to see you guys. Let's just get right into this, Tony. What is okay, we already said what your job title is, where you work. What do you do?
So, I wear a few hats. The work I do for the Coalition is 100% volunteer work. I'm here supporting and advocating for sport fishing.
Good.
And I've been doing it for quite a long time. I got a full-time job that works with public employees, retirement, helping those guys understand what the plans are that their employers have provided for them. And then I have a charter business up out of Leland and Grand Traverse Bay.
Go ahead and plug your charter business.
Real and Leland Fishing Charters out of Leland, and we also fish out of Harbor West there in Grand Traverse Bay.
Oh, good.
So we got a couple guys helping me out.
You got an interest in all this. I mean, you're a sportsman.
I do.
Yeah.
I do have an interest in this, and but really my interest is my passion.
Sure.
Just like everyone that's on this podcast or watching this channel tonight.
There's a reason they're watching.
They're
care.
passionate.
Yeah.
They want to fish.
Yeah. Yep.
And so do I.
Yep. I completely agree with you. So the Coalition protects the Great Lakes resources in a nutshell. You guys have a nice conglomeration of people. You say you even have attorneys on board. So you guys are pretty much set up to fight the fights that you think are worth fighting.
Well, our fight really as the Coalition is solely to understand the consent decree
Okay.
and advocate for the rights of the recreational angler in terms of how the consent decree is being crafted, how it's going to be managed going forward.
Enforced,
enforced. We've been around some iteration thereof since 1979.
You guys have been around for a long time. All right. So let's put the brakes on right there, because like you and I were talking about before we even started doing this, there's people out there that have no idea what we're talking about. And there's people, I'm sure, on this podcast, maybe you have no dog in the fight. You're Wisconsin or you're New York, wherever you may be, this may not pertain to you at all, but what is the consent decree?
You know, the consent decree is an agreement that came out of a federal lawsuit.
Okay.
So, you know, before we actually were really sport fishing on the Great Lakes, there was mostly commercial fishing.
Okay.
1965 on Lake Michigan, 1962 on Lake Superior, they said no more taking of lake trout commercially. Well, in 1973, because the tribal fishers kept fishing, and they said they had a treaty right to fish.
Okay.
So in 1973, they went to the federal government, which they signed the treaty with. They sued the state of Michigan in 1973 for not following the Washington Treaty of 1836.
By they, you mean the tribal entities?
The tribal entities were following it because the tribal entities, along with the Fed, sued the state.
Oh, I got you.
So then, 1979, there was a ruling by Judge Noel Fox that said the tribes could fish in the waters of the ceded waters of the Washington Treaty,
Okay.
unlimited by the state.
Okay.
Meaning they could go where they wanted to, when they wanted to, using the gear that they would use.
Their choice.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, that went through, and then there's a lot of legal things that happened between 79 and 85 with injunctions and stopping that, and then trying to figure out if there's a way to co-manage between the tribes and the state. Well, ultimately, in 1985, they came to what was the first consent decree,
Okay.
which was which determined the management of the Great Lakes for, at that time, 3 tribes: Sault Ste. Marie, Grand Traverse, and Bay Mills Indian Community.
Okay.
And then later on, we added Little River Band, and then the Little Traverse Bay
Traverse.
Band. They came along between 85, and they were included in the 2000 agreement. So the first consent decree was a management scheme of how to share the resource.
Okay.
And a new judge took over between 79 and 85. That was Judge Enslin. And right now, this federal case, because this is what this is. This is a lawsuit. It's a case that's been going on since 73. And therefore, now we have an agreement in 85. We're going to go to agreement, and they get another one in 2000.
Right.
How to manage it.
So 85 to 2000, and that one expired in 2020, if I remember.
And then the 2000 agreement was to expire in August of 2020.
2020.
But it's been extended, I think, 7 or 8 times, and currently it's in an indefinite extension.
Okay.
And so,
And what's the reason it's in such an extension?
well, at this point in time, they've been negotiating. The negotiation took longer. Some say because of COVID, and that's true. The groups weren't able
They
to
couldn't
get
get
together.
together, sure.
So it took longer, and we all know now that it's been talked about for the last month. It's because there's a draft proposed consent decree out there of how they're going to manage the Great Lakes and the tribal ceded waters for the next 24 years.
Okay, so what you're saying is since 2020 they've been putting this draft together.
Yes.
And this flew under the radar somehow then?
It didn't fly under the radar. It didn't have to be public.
Okay. And what's the reason for that?
Well, because there's no requirement for it to be, because it's not legislatively determined.
Okay.
It's not a regulation that, as of right now, doesn't go in front of the Natural Resources Commission to vote on and become our policy. It's a lawsuit, and the Attorney General from the state of Michigan is trying to settle this lawsuit for the state of Michigan.
I'm following you.
And they brought in the DNR because it's dealing with a public trust resource, the fishery. And this is where we sit today, that there's this draft agreement. Now it's only agreed now between 4 of the 5 tribes. The Sioux tribe has petition the court to self-regulate.
Okay, so
Nobody go on their own.
they're trying to opt out. They want to do their own thing.
They want to do their own thing, and I'm not sure what that means.
Okay, all right. So the extension on the consent decree from 2020 is now in this draft.
Yes.
What does the draft entail? What's that looking like for not only the tribal entities, but for the recreational sportsmen?
So for the last 37 years, 38 years, since 85, we've gotten used, all of us that fish on the Great Lakes and the seeded waters have seen when and where nets are at, what type of gear can be used.
Right.
So what's the biggest change is what they decided to do. They used to, well, the 2000 agreement, the 85 agreement, wanted to reduce gill nets and move to a management scheme that helped protect the lake, grow back some of the fisheries, give zones. It was all based on a zonal management where there wouldn't be gear conflicts. So there would be recreational zones, there would be trout net zones, there would be gill net zones, and then you would all find that the different user groups would end up using the waters and going after the fish in ways in which they could all equally get relatively get an equal share of the fishery.
Sure.
And so now that's changing.
All right.
The new draft decree is going and increasing gill nets
Okay.
in most of the tribal seeded waters.
So I know in the past, you and I talked about this a little. We talked about trap nets versus gill nets. I remember however many years ago when there were nets out here in front of Manistee, the majority were trap nets. In fact, I think they all were. But now it seems like the push is to go towards the gill nets. Do you know why, or do you have an opinion on why that might be?
I've asked the same question. Why would you want to go to a gill net? It's an indiscriminate, killer of fish.
Right.
It's non-selective. And the selective manner with also using gill nets, it seemed like it was a good mix. I've heard, trap nets, don't catch lake trout.
Okay.
And I'm going, I've seen the trap nets be quite successful at catching lake trout, so I don't know if that's the answer. Then maybe it's harder to make an income on a large boat commercial fishing operation.
Right, sure.
So a gill net may allow for smaller operations.
To get their foot in there.
But I haven't really got a great answer on that because, there's all these considerations of trap nets and gill nets and zones and then, markings of nets and recreational fishers and where they can expect to fish and do they want to even get entanglement with nets.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that a little. So I'm going to grab some of your opinions on those topics here in a little while. But the gill nets are what trouble me as being not only the charter captain, just being a guy out on the water. If I just had a recreational boat, a lot of times those nets are so poorly marked. But being a charter captain, those gill nets are such an indiscriminate taker of fish. And they're a no escape net. So really anything that gets in there and cannot manage its way out of the small holes, whatever size holes that net may have, and I know there's different variations, they're not getting out. So what's your opinion on when the tribal entities say, this is my quota? For this week we can take so many tons of fish or so many fish or whatever it may be. How do you think they're going to regulate not overtaking the species?
So like so many things that we have when there's regulations, there's a lot of regulations that require or rely upon self-reporting, like in our charter industry.
Charter, sure.
Right?
Yep.
We have to self-report, which then goes into a model, which then tells you if we're, not going over a certain limit. Like here, we're here in Manistee, and there's a limit of a certain amount of lake trout that you guys can take as recreational fishers in that waters.
Right.
If you ever went over that, there's a limit, and then there's current agreement, there's a penalty of some sort. We've experienced that, up in Lake Huron, we've experienced that in Grand Traverse Bay, whereas going forward in this new agreement still relies on self-reporting. And like in anything, when they're self-reporting, you're going to have some form of checks and balances to see how you're doing it.
Yep.
So is the reporting system that we have now in the 2000 agreement going to be improved in The new agreement, the tribal coordinator, the tribal coordination unit manager says, yeah, it's a much better system. And I think there are some aspects of it because it's digital versus paper.
Okay.
I like that, but is it going to allow or monitor or be a way in which to keep everyone from going over? I guess if we all report accurately and properly, and
Well, yeah, that's just it,
we
isn't
stop when we do. Yeah, it's self-reported.
it? Yeah, the system's only as good as the person or the people that are
Yeah.
going to be using it. Yeah, I mean,
Correct.
just like you and I being charter captains, if you misuse the system, there's ways to take advantage of it. So I guess it boils down to the people using the system. But I know that a lot of these tribal entities, and I know Little River right here in Manistee, I know everybody at that tribal police department, from the director down to whomever. I have great respect for all of them. I know that they take their jobs very seriously, especially their conservation aspects. What do you think, what is the tribal entities conservation system going to be to enforce these laws?
I've asked this question because I was in many of the negotiations. I said, these regulations at best are hard to understand and probably even harder to enforce.
Sure.
What are the budgets for enforcement? How are we going to ensure that everyone is going to want to comply? And, I never got a solid answer.
Okay. All right.
So I don't know.
So I guess I mean, that seems to be a lot of the answers that we're going to hear on this right now. Is you don't know, I don't know, nobody seems to know because everything's really waving in the wind right now. My gut feeling is I think the tribal entities will do a good job enforcing. But there are ways to slip through the cracks on that. And like you were talking about already, being self-reporting. If there's no reason for somebody to be checked on, they may not be. But I'm hoping the tribal entities come up with a way to do random checks. Go out and check the nets.
So do I.
Go out and check the quotas. Does the coalition have anything? Do you guys have any influence when it comes to getting your voices heard in this? I guess that's the bottom line, isn't it?
In years past, in the 85 decree, yes, we had a lot of influence. 2000, we did. I think we started that way. I think we thought that we would. And, we had agreements to work with the state, at least, and their negotiating team to review proposals, to provide them feedback on what the recreational, because we represent clubs and conservation organizations all across the state.
Sure.
And we thought that we could work with the state and really let them know what we thought should be done. And we came from a standpoint we have to use biology because that's actually one of the requirements of this new agreement, or of the past agreements as well. That you got to protect the resource, and so that's where we started. And I know that when we were working with the state, that is where we stood, and that was our point of view whenever we reviewed any proposal that was going to happen. And our communication with the state broke down last summer. Okay. And before we ever saw a draft agreement or whatever, they stopped communicating with us.
Okay.
So we don't have that influence, and I'm not really sure if we had that influence over that, 2.5 years of negotiations where we actually were meeting with them.
Sure. Well, from what I've understood is this being in the federal courts, I know a lot of this takes place down in Kalamazoo. Sounds like you guys have had closed doors where you haven't been allowed into these courtrooms.
Well, we're allowed into the courtroom.
You're not allowed to voice any type of opinion. It's not an open forum.
No, it's not an open forum. So we, as what our role is as the coalition is called the amici curiae, or a friend of the court, and we're able to observe, and we can't speak openly in the negotiations or into the court unless we're asked.
You have to be recognized.
We have to be recognized, and we've had a couple opportunities in the court just recently. And when we filed an objection, or actually not an objection, we'll be doing those next week. When we filed the petition to the court to be a full party, then we are able to have oral arguments for that. And then in the negotiations, we would meet and talk with the parties like in sidebar conversations at lunch, because a lot of times when we got together, we'd all eat lunch together, and we'd sit at tables with conservation committee members and tribal fishers and council members of the different tribes, and we would talk over different views and positions, but we could never do it collectively while they were negotiating together, nor could we actually submit a review of any proposal directly to any of the other parties other than the state, because we had a working agreement with the state.
Okay, but it sounds like that's even broken down.
It has, yeah.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. So what's the answer here, Tony? I mean, what's the coalition's agenda right now?
So
what are you guys trying to do?
What's the answer? What's our agenda? What we're trying to do? And so, because it's a lawsuit, it, basically most of it gets done from a legal avenue, a legal way. Yes, we've tried to review everything to see if the agreement is going to, you've got multiple user groups. It has to be a shared resource of some sort, some way, somehow. You got to protect the resource. We have to, probably the one that's used the most is that we got to protect the treaty right, which they're allowed to fish commercially with gill nets.
So I think what you're saying is that you guys, if you had an optimal outcome, it would be for everybody to find a middle ground.
Yeah, and that middle ground, I'm not going to say the 2000 agreement is the best, but we've made it work for 37, 38 years now.
Yeah.
And so it's worked. Maybe we all thought 3, 4, 5 years ago when we were getting ready to go into and start negotiations, there'd be some minor changes. I guess we were wrong.
I guess you got a little blindsided on that. Well, let's talk a little bit about what are the tribal entities trying to introduce? Where are they trying to put the gill nets, and what areas are they going to be affecting?
So there's, easiest way for me to do is think of a map, and there will be some maps out on our website here within a day or so.
Actually, I'm gonna let everybody know. Tony sent me the maps yesterday.
I think he sent you one map.
I think I got all 5.
Oh, good,
Yeah,
good.
I got all 5. What I'm going to do is I have to go home. I need to download those, copy them over. I'll have those maps on my Facebook page starting tomorrow. So my Facebook link is down below. If you want to take a look at those maps, it's a good idea. I'll have those up and available. But you'll have them up available also, and your website is also linked on this channel.
And then all of the organizations that we represent will have it. You'll find it on social media. They'll be there. So I'll start here at the southern end of the lake. Michigan. Tribal waters start from the Grand River, going north all the way until you get to the Straits of Mackinac, and you run into Lake Huron all the way down until you get to Alpena. Of course, it's only the Michigan borders, that imaginary line in the middle of the lakes, and then the eastern half of Lake Superior. Okay. So down here where we're at, we haven't seen gill net use, large mesh gill net use, because the current agreement doesn't allow large mesh gill net use south of the 45th parallel, which is about where Leland is,
about
on
Alpena,
the Little Finger.
And Alpena on the other side.
And Alpena, it's, well, actually, their line was the Hammond Bay, and I can't remember exactly what the point is, but from the Hammond Bay, there's a road. But actually, just about, 10 miles north of Rogers City was that line going on a northeast track. They couldn't gill net south of that. Okay. And then up in Lake Superior, there was what was called the Western Trap Net Zone, and I believe from memory that's near, I think just east of Munising, something like that. Okay. And then everything west of Munising was a trap net zone. Everything east was a gill net zone. So
is the new proposal now trying to introduce gill nets to all those areas?
They're going to retain gill nets in the areas that they had through the 2000 agreement. Okay. And this proposal is to enter into areas where they were prohibited in the 2000 agreement, or where they're restricted and they want to get greater use, so less restrictions. All right. And that's what we're going to find, both small and large mesh. Okay. Because right here where we were at, I said there was no large mesh gill net south of the 45th, but they could use small mesh gill net for chubs. Sure. Down at 240 feet or lower. And that's going to be retained in this proposed agreement. That has been retained in this proposed agreement. And then what they're looking for is additional large fish gill net. But here it's restricted by date and by amount and by operations.
Our friend's back.
So it's not, year-round gill netting in this area.
Okay.
But there are some other areas of the lake
Well, from what I
that you'll
understand,
find like close. You got some expansion of gill nets over in Bay de Noc. You've got expansion on the Grand Traverse Bays for day after Labor Day to day before the Saturday before or Friday before Memorial Day, and not all of the inner bays of Grand Traverse, but more. They've got more gill netting that you'll find on the inner bay of Little Traverse Bay.
I don't know if we're going to be able to do anything about this.
She just wants to hang out.
She does, that's fine.
And so we've got, that line that I was talking about over there in near Rogers City. That's come much closer to Rogers City.
Okay.
I think they can gill in this proposed agreement. It comes down to about 4 miles north of the city.
Okay.
Of Rogers City, and then that western trap net zone. That basically has been converted over to gill net zone in Lake Superior.
All right.
Yeah, they've got up there, I think, Standard Rock, what is it? I think it's called Big Reef, and they got a couple areas inside of All Train Bay and Munising Bay, very small, in my opinion, that are restricted, but
Okay.
the rest, almost all of Lake Superior is gill netted.
This is difficult having a serious
It sure
conversation
is.
right now. I got this little girl on me. So what's the coalition stance or opinion on the use of those gill nets?
Well, the biggest problem with gill nets is they're indiscriminate. They're not selective.
Right.
They kill fish, and we started off talking about it, and there's going to be some biologist telling you, "Oh, Chris, you said once they hit them, they're dead." There's studies.
Mm-hmm.
It's not 100%. I think it's more like 70% of the fish that are released from a gill net.
Okay.
70% of those fish that get released out of gill net will die. I'm not a biologist. This is just stuff that I've read. But you're going to find that the biggest problem is bycatch.
Right.
So, they've got these provisions, and especially down here in the Manistee, that if they put out their nets, they can't retain salmon.
Right.
Right? And the thing about it is these salmon, they don't live just here. They swim around here for a while, but
I know exactly where you're going with this. Yep.
they swim in the entire lake, and we have additional gill, millions. And when I say millions of feet, I mean you take the length of net, you multiply it times the days they use it, and that's their effort.
Okay.
And so, we took out 14 million feet of gill net effort in the 2000 agreement. I think they're going to be putting about that much or more back in,
Okay.
depending on the usage, right? If they use the nets and they use them multiple days, it'll be more. So these nets are in the water, the fish are swimming through the lake. There's just more opportunity for them to get caught.
Sure.
Now, salmon are pretty good avoiding gill nets, but they're going to, they live in the lake 3+ years. There's a chance they can run into
There's a
them.
very good chance.
Yeah.
Sure. Yep. Absolutely. Although it's not the targeted species,
No.
there's still a good chance of die-off from those nets. Hey, kitty.
But salmon isn't the biggest thing. The thing about it is that all fish,
right.
because salmon are pretty good of evading these nets. I mean, they've been gill netting, all through the 37 years of this agreement, and we're still catching fish, right?
We're just going to take one little 5-second break here, kitty. I'm going to go get you a treat so it can keep you occupied. I think I have to go in there just for a second. There you go. I put her in that room with a treat. She's happy. I'll let her out here in a sec.
So as I was saying, it's all the other fish.
Right.
I mean, this agreement is actually going to target more lake trout, whereas the previous agreement was trying to rehabilitate lake trout.
Right.
It's going to target more walleye. It's going to target more perch. And those are real big species up for like the Bay de Noc and some other bays
Traverse
up
Bay.
north.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. Yeah.
And so those fish, the Cisco fishery that people started to really get turned on to in the Grand Traverse Bay. Those fish are going to be susceptible to these nets. And so these are some issues that we have to deal with. If the nets go in, the bycatch of these fish, that's going to be an issue.
Do you think the nets are unavoidable? Do you think that they're going to happen one way or the other?
Well, they're unavoidable now because the tribes have a right to use gill nets,
Yep.
and so they're using them now. So are they going to? What is the ultimate? I mean, they put together a proposal. Are these groups going to walk it back a little bit, make some clarifications? I don't know. Maybe they'll submit it and they'll consent on what's written.
Make some changes, maybe try to find more of that happy
I would hope.
middle ground.
That's what we want to happen.
That's what your purpose is.
Yeah, we're hoping that they walk it back. They find a little bit. It's more biologically based, scientifically based, to try to keep, protect the resource. That's what we're afraid of, that the resource is not going to be protected.
What you're all about. Now, with the trap nets that used to be around this area, those were situated on the bottom of the lake with the markers up on the surface. Gill nets, are those the same type of construction, or are these long-standing gill nets? Do you know?
So the way that the typical gill net is, and for those of us that ever looked at the regulation guidebook, it sort of shows you how a gill net is laid out. And so we'll use that as the example. It's just a wall of monofilament.
It's like a net.
Corks on the top, weights on the bottom,
Right.
stretched across. And the thing about that is they typically only have anchors on either end, holding it down.
Mm-hmm.
Where the trap net has multiple anchors because they're trying to suspend this box with big leads in there.
Big wings.
And all that. Trap nets, as I'm told, because I'm not an experienced commercial fisherman,
Not
but
even-
I'm told that the trap nets, basically, they anchor better
Okay.
than trap nets. But the thing about, and they're marked quite differently. Personally, me, and this isn't anything, I can sort of sometimes figure out if it's a trap net by the way it's marked, and I try real hard, and if I can pick all the buoys up, then I know it is.
Okay.
But when it's a gill net, depending on how long it is, I only see one buoy most of the time.
Right.
And I don't know what direction it's going. So that's where I bug out of the area.
Sure.
Because I don't know where it's going.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you on the trap nets. When we see them around here, I could generally tell where it was located just because of the way that the markers were laid out. But I also saw many times the markers were substandard. I mean, below par at best. What are the regulations for, if you know this, what are the regulations for marking of a gill net, especially at night?
So what they did in this proposed agreement is the current regulations are that you got to have a staff on each end. I believe it's 4 or 5 feet out of the water.
That sounds right.
The previous agreement was a 12 by 12 orange reflective marker up on the staff. Now that's gone to 16 inches square,
Okay.
which is bigger.
Bigger.
And it has to be one on the other end. We really did try to get some intermittent markers so that we could see, if we couldn't see the other staff, we could actually try to figure out which direction
Which
that
way
was
it was
going.
laying, correct.
I don't believe those got in. I don't have it in front of me, but from my memory, I don't know if we got any other improvements in gill net markings other than the size of the orange reflective marker.
Okay. Because I know I asked people for comments on this channel, the things they wanted to hear. And so I'm synopsizing many of those comments. Instead of just reading off comments, I thought it'd be better to just put it in a conversation. That was one that came up pretty often. Markings of nets, especially at night.
Well, there's no lights.
There's no lights, and there's not going to be.
No.
No, I understand that too. And like I said, before when we saw the trap nets out here, the way many of those were marked, I'd see milk jugs floating on the surface instead of the correct markers and flags.
Well, in milk jugs, in some instances, the requirement is a jug that's colored and marked and is of a certain size.
Right, so it should be
so
visible.
the milk jug may have actually met the regulation.
Okay.
Depending on what type of net it was, where it was set, depth of water, things like that.
Right.
So it's typically not acceptable for a trap net because they talk about it has to be this orange size reflective, like a size of a gallon sized jug, but it has to be reflectively seen. What we're going to find is that with there wasn't a big change in net markings
And for the regulations.
between the proposed agreement and the old agreement.
Okay.
So we wanted it. All of us wanted it because we want to avoid the nets.
That's a good thing.
There were some like proposals that I read where we had to get the point across that fishermen want to avoid nets.
Yeah.
We really do. We don't want to lose our gear.
Recreational boaters would like to avoid them too, I'm sure.
They would.
Right. Yeah, but losing gear, I've gotten a downrigger ball stuck in a net before, and I know exactly what that pucker factor was like when the boat started crawling to a stop and then going backwards a little. There's some danger there.
There is danger.
There certainly is.
And so we want to avoid them. One thing that's really cool about the proposed draft decree that I like, because there are some things in there I do like, is what is being written about what they're going to do with the Little River Band. Little River Band says they're going to give GPS coordinates out. It's been a common practice with the current trap net fisher letting some of the clubs or the Charter Boat Association, Ludington Charter Boat Association, maybe I don't know if they're letting the Manistee County Sport Fishing group know, but they have been informing and letting them know where those nets are.
I agree.
That's
They were.
that's good.
Yeah.
If we know where they are, we'll avoid them.
Right. I remember there being some websites even back in the early 2000s or mid 2000s that even had those up on them. So, and by word of mouth too, if you stopped into any bait shop, hey, have you seen the net at such and such? Have you seen it here? Watch out for this there. Right.
And I like what you just brought up there. If you've seen the net, the difference between the 2000 agreement and this proposed one is that they're leaning towards more gill nets. Gill nets are easy to move. So it may be here today and moves tomorrow.
Right.
Whereas the trap net stayed in the same place for long periods of time.
It did too.
So that word of mouth just may be wrong information the next day.
Sure, it could be a day old and way past its usefulness. It's good information. What can people do to help you out? I mean, there's what do we got on here right now? We got over 100 people on here right now. If people want to help out the coalition some way, what can they do?
So the first thing is this is a lawsuit, and we have lawyers that represent recreational anglers. I'm 100% volunteer. Everyone else is 100% volunteer with that association. Everyone else is a volunteer from another organization. And so we have one budget item. Well, actually, it's two. One is making sure we pay the legal fees. The other is making sure we pay the fees required to be a nonprofit with the federal and state regulations.
Right.
So what can you do to help out? One is we do need funding to keep our lawyers in the fight. There's ways to do that. Go directly to our website and you can make a donation. Best way to do it is join your local club or if you're a charter boat, join the Charter Boat Association or the Ludington Charter Boat Association, or join the Michigan Steelheaders and
There's a lot of
MUCC.
too, yeah.
Join them. But like here, Manistee
Sport
County
Fishing
Sport
Association.
Fishing Association, they're helping us out. The Ludington Charter Boat Association is helping us out. We've got groups all over the state, up and down the shorelines, and even on the interior. Those clubs, join your clubs. Your membership will go to help support us. Be active in your clubs, and ask your clubs to support the coalition because we want to be counted. We want you guys to be counted, so that when we talk to the state, that we're saying we're representing. I mean, there's 1 million plus anglers in this state.
Right.
We want to represent all of them because these fish belong to all of us, and we want you. I mean, we get to share these with the tribes. When I say it belongs to all of us, I mean all of us, the tribes included.
Absolutely.
Basically, the way it's set up is it should be somewhat equally shared.
Right.
And we expect them to
completely
get
agree.
about half, and we're going to get about half, and that's what the management process is supposed to do. So to get involved, to get represented, you got to do it sometimes with just your voice, signing a petition. If you got a few bucks to spare, do that. If you join a club, volunteer and help out the club in any fundraising events that they may have.
Good point right there. Yeah. Get into your clubs, help out, like you said, any kind of fundraising events that they have. That's a great way to help right there. Even tournaments.
Sure, at tournaments. I mean, all of these clubs find ways to generate revenue,
right?
And then that's how they're able to find from their budgets a way to send over a check to the coalition to keep our lawyers, in the courtroom and advocating for all recreational fishermen.
Tony, they weren't lying when they told me you were the guy to have on. You know this very, very well. Your knowledge is very, very in depth on this. So I say thank you very much. We're not done yet. We're gonna grab some questions.
All right.
And so everybody, I appreciate your patience. Tony here obviously is a wealth of information. If you have questions, I'm going to open it up right now. Throw them onto the chat. I'm going to read him around the phone, and we're gonna see what we can answer for everybody. If we missed anything, let's hear about it. So Chris Olson is saying, what can be done if the nets are not properly marked? Do you know of any channels other than contacting law enforcement? That would be my first thing, is get a hold of tribal law enforcement. Local dispatch entities can help out in that, and hopefully they get some ways that way.
I agree with you, but the best way to do is the wrap line.
Sure.
You let the you call there and let the MDNR know that. This question comes up a lot. Well, what can the MDNR law enforcement do?
What is that for people that don't know?
So the wrap line or our conservation officers is where we're going. When you call the wrap line, you're going to have a conservation officer dispatched to investigate the complaint.
Yep.
That's what it is.
Yep.
And the conservation officers have the right to enforce all the laws on the Great Lakes, as well as the tribal law enforcement. They can also, there's this cooperation between the governments of the tribes and the state, and actually the U.S. Fish and Wildlife and other federal agents that have jurisdiction on the water.
Absolutely. Yep. The DNR, like you said, they have every authority out there that anybody else has, and they will get you're absolutely right, they will get the ball moving probably faster than anything else. Yeah, good answer. TD Schlatt wants to know, why are they not required to record and report bycatch?
So they are required to record and report bycatch. In this proposed draft decree, when it goes on the section that talks about reporting, I don't have it memorized, but it says they must record the weight of all species landed, not sold. The retailers, they have to report only what's sold, because at that point, the tribal fisher is going to not retain the bycatch. He's going to record it, but it's not going to be retained unless he has a limit of like 15 fish a day or whatever.
Right.
So the fisher is responsible for recording all fish landed by species and weight.
Got it. Jeff Spear wants to know, when does this new plan or this new proposal, when is this set to begin? Is there a date?
There is not a date.
That's a good question, by the way.
It's still being litigated.
Yeah.
You know, right now the judge has got the federal government, 4 tribes in the state of Michigan in agreement. The Sioux tribe is not in an agreement. So right now I'll tell you a little bit about the process, and I'm not the lawyer, so hopefully I get this right. That objections to the draft proposed consent decree have to be in on the 20th of January. We know that the coalition's objecting. I believe that the Sioux tribe is going to be objecting. Then after that, the other parties have 45 days to answer or respond to the objections that are going to be submitted on the 20th. And then I haven't seen or heard from the judge what's going to happen after that through our lawyers. We're waiting for more instruction.
Okay, so we're standing by to stand by.
And us as the coalition, we still do have an appeal at the Sixth Circuit Court waiting to be heard to allow us to be a full party in this case, which would give us the ability to have a little more say. I'm not going to say we're going to be able to rewrite this thing at all. No, but we'll be able to have a little more say and be recognized more than we have been. We'll see what happens with that if it ever gets approved. If it doesn't, then we're right where we are right now.
Right where you're standing right now. Okay, good answer. Scott Loss wants to know, if the nets are not properly marked by the tribes, are they, so if somebody gets hurt by a tribal net, say there's a boating accident, he wants to know, are the tribal entities going to be responsible for those incidents? I think that's going to be case-by-case basis. I'm sure that there could be some lawyers brought in, things like that. But as far as legally responsible, I doubt it. Just talking from my point of view and my experience, There might be some civil ways to go about that, but as far as legally held, I doubt it.
I would. I don't know that because I'm not a lawyer. I don't practice law, but I do. I will make one simple recommendation: get an incident report. Call one of the officers and get an incident report.
Yeah, you'd have to. You would have to.
Yeah.
There's a boating accident on the water. There has to be an incident report done by the DNR or the state police. They have to be. So that'd be your first step. Oh. Mike Radcliffe is saying, Tony, why is this decree supposed to be a 24-year decree? Shouldn't the decree be 17 years to end in 2040?
You know, that's
a good question.
It is, because we started out in 85 and we went from, for 15. And then, we went to a 20-year decree, and now they settled on a 24-year decree. There's no rhyme or reason, Mike. It's not based on what was done in the past, and what they sort of figured out is they have a management scheme that's based on 3 years of collecting data. And so 24 divided by 3 is 8 cycles, and I think that's sort of what it is. Okay. But it could be, whatever, it could be 18 years. It
right.
doesn't. I don't know why they decided 24 years. Maybe some people think this is too much work.
Maybe, yeah, right. Maybe they want to make it 50 years so they don't have to mess with it again. Good question, though. Real good question. Dakota Joe wants to know where in the water will what depth will the nets be set in? And he wants to know what's the best advice if you run up on one. So from experience, and I'm sure you've had it as well, try to avoid them at all costs. They should be marked as well. If you see one, I normally avoided them like the plague. There were some captains, though, that snugged their boats right up into them because it's structure, and structure does hold fish. But a lot of those captains paid the cost, too, after losing a bunch of gear. But what is the typical depth that they're going to be targeting with these nets?
So, Chris, you give them all good advice. Avoid them. The depths are all different. Some can be on the surface. Some can have a minimum depth that they have to be in 20 foot or less of water. Some have to be set at 90 feet or less. Some can be suspended. There's no requirement. Like the typical gill net is corks with a lead line, but there's absolutely no regulation that says they can't have a suspended gill net. It's not common,
right? But
there's nothing that says they can't in this proposed draft agreement.
Because it's species dependent.
Yes, there's some that are set way down. So just because you want to fish super deep, there is a requirement that small mesh gill net has to be set 240 feet or deeper. So you may end up, thinking that you're trying for some of those real deep fish. You might run into, if you can't see the markers, you might run into a small mesh gill net.
Okay, all right. Real good question there, though, Joe. Yeah, from my opinion or from my experience, I avoided them. I found myself in the middle of the one time, not by choice, but it was poorly marked and the visibility out there was terrible, and I couldn't get out of there fast enough. And how I wormed my way out of that thing, I don't know how I did it. I got really, really lucky.
I think it's luck most of the time to get out without getting caught.
I think I lost a 220 copper, and that was it. Yeah. Oh, what else do we have here? Bill Gerlach wants to know, how much is stocking being considered in the proposal? Is there some type of money included with the harvesting amounts? So I think what he's asking is, are they considering stocking numbers because the stocking numbers are better now? Is that the reason that's driving these proposals? If I'm missing your point there, Bill, let me know.
So stocking is a real important topic, especially in the world that we're in now as recreational fishers, when we talk about Chinook equivalents and how many of each species can go in, and where are we going to put these fish, and what rivers make best sense. I mean, we're all looking forward to what we believe was going to be approved to have a Chinook increase in Lake Michigan come this spring with stocking. There is, in some sections, there is a mandatory amount of fish that are going to be stocked in some places. Okay. And I think the most common place is up there in Nuns Creek, St. Martin's Bay area. I think that's called the home waters of the Sault Ste. Marie tribe. They got to put 250,000 fingerlings. Then up in northern Michigan, it's not a stocking requirement, but it's going to relate to stocking because they wrote into this proposed decree that they have an absolute, I guess you could say, floor on lake trout that they're always able to get 550,000 pounds of lake trout in management units 1, 2, and 3 of Lake Michigan. And so there are some areas where when you start getting into stocking, I think if I read it correctly, and it's really hard for me to understand the stocking part, and I've read it quite a few times, but I believe that they're going to start with the stocking limits now, but here's the change. When they throw in mortality, which then says, what can you take? So then what can you put in? And so there is a formula. I don't quite understand it. So I don't know what they're going to start with.
And that's what he just followed up with a question there, Bill Gerlach did. He's saying with the possible increase of the harvest by netting, is there going to be extra stocking in the lakes? And I think that's what you were just answering right there.
It may be extra stocking for the targeted species for the tribes. Like they talked about whitefish rehabilitation in this decree. And they're starting to put together a plan of how that's going to work. How would that impact stocking? Yet to be determined. And then the stocking of lake trout is going to be determined on the levels of mortality that they actually won't even determine until later on.
Yeah, you can't do it right now, can you?
Well, it's actually, they won't even talk about it. I think the decree says they won't set the mortality levels until a meeting, their next, I think it's tribal council meeting, but I don't want to, I'm not positive because there's something else I think was met at that date as well.
Okay, good question, good answer. Hugh Merrill wants to know, why are the nets not being marked in the middle? And is there any discussion on putting GPS markers on the nets?
So these are all good questions, and I think we've heard the Tribal Coordination Unit Manager talk about that moving gill nets, the GPS data might be old, even if they had to do it every time they placed them. I don't know if there's a spot yet, even though I think they could figure it out, that we could all go to and figure out the most updated net locations. But that wasn't something that was worked out in this decree. I believe it was asked.
Okay.
I know that when the state went to the sport fishing groups and asked what they wanted, net marking was a big deal.
Oh, absolutely.
They all wanted it changed. They wanted to know where they're going to be. So why aren't they, marked in the middle?
Right.
I believe it was something that was asked. It just didn't get in the decree, maybe because of some determinations from, they're negotiating. Not everything gets in.
Sure. From what I understand, also the middle section of the net is not a real dangerous point unless the gear is just below the surface or somewhere you can get your gear into. It's one of those deeper nets, you're not going to have a problem anyway.
The point of having the middle of a net marked on a deep net is that if you can't see the other end, you don't know its direction. If you're trolling at the depth of which it's placed, you don't know which way to turn. And I think that's why people want to see a marker before the other end.
Yeah, I've been there. I completely agree with that. Oh, Leroy Dowding. Good to see you, Leroy. Also, I missed something here. Who was this? Oh, Ryan Purchase became a member of the Tangled Tackle Army. Ryan, thanks for doing that. Welcome to it. Leroy was asking, do any of the tribal entities stock their own fish?
They do. Our tribal partners are good in many ways, that they do like to stock fish, and they are working on stocking fish. The Sioux tribe had, I don't know if it's still going on, previous to this, they had a good working relationship up there in the UP with walleye stocking. The little Traverse Bay Band has worked on whitefish and walleye stocking. The Grand Traverse Band has done that over there in the Grand Traverse Bays, at least for walleye. And so I don't know it all. I haven't read all of their stocking initiatives, but they are stocking fish.
Good. Glad to hear it. Good question, Leroy. Eric Nearing is saying, Scott Garbs, in the event that your gear gets caught in one of the nets, do you have the right to damage that net to free your gear? Or I would say for safety's sake, if you damage a net to avoid some type of damage to yourself or harm to anybody else on your boat, yeah, I would say you have that right. If you get your rod stuck in a net, I don't think you're going to be able to swim down there and cut up the net if that's what you're asking. That's a question I don't think you even have an answer. That's
I would say
speculative at
you have
best.
to be safe, but I don't want that question to go out, can we damage gear?
Exactly,
No,
yeah.
because that's
Yeah.
like damaging anything else on land. You're not allowed to damage anything for your safety. Then you would fill out the incident report, and you just wouldn't cut yourself out.
Right.
You fill out the incident report, and whatever the responsibilities are on you, you would do the right thing and follow through.
Yeah, yep, that's a good way to put it. But I know if I got my downrigger ball stuck in a net, and the way to get my boat out of there is cut my downrigger cable or the net, I'd probably take the option of cutting the net. I'm not saying go out there and do that type of thing, but if I did that, I would make a report to the tribal entity to let them know I did do that. That's the right thing to do.
Or if you lose your gear,
Sure.
let them know that they caught your gear and see if they'll give it back.
We're getting some questions that kind of been covered already. Eric Nearing saying, why can't they make an area that says this area for the next 30 miles, this way for 4 miles, such and such, this area is gonna have nets.
So
I
they sort of did that in
Right.
the previous agreement, that they told you areas where they can. It wasn't that granular or that narrowly defined. They would talk about, like I said, south of the 45th, you wouldn't see them. North of them, you could. So be on the lookout for them.
Right.
And so they never got that granular.
Good question, though. I mean, there's so many things that we could talk about. They're just going to be speculative because there's no answers right now. There's just not, and that's going to be a case-by-case basis, as things happen. But there are some things that can be talked about as we're sitting here. Let me read a few more here. Eric Anderson saying, Tony, explain to everyone how the tribes in Wisconsin are watching the decree. Okay, let's see if I get this right here. The tribes in Wisconsin are watching the decree closely and could have more impact on Lake Michigan fish stocks in the future. I think what he's asking is, do you feel that Wisconsin is paying attention?
I personally haven't spoke to anyone in Wisconsin that would know that, but this is what I do know. I do know that there are tribes in Wisconsin that are consignatory to the Washington Treaty of 1836. And there are other treaties that help, settle the state of Michigan. And if these tribes go and claim their treaty fishing right through this process that these 5 tribes have done, and I believe that the Sioux tribe has they've actually had it written down in a couple treaties, but I think it was the 1855 treaty as well. But I mean, who knows? If you got a treaty right and you claim it and you want to go start commercially fishing, then maybe they will. It could be a problem, Eric, when I say, how do we now manage as a lake management unit, Lake Michigan, the basin, when we have an expansion going on the Michigan side, and if they're able to do it on the Wisconsin side, how is the resource then shared as we would expect it to be shared? It makes it that much more complicated.
It does. Yep, you're adding that much more into the soup. Yep, that's a lot. Good question, though. So the questions are winding down. I appreciate everybody for asking, for watching, for Tony. I appreciate you being here. You're a deep dive into this thing. I'll tell you that right now. I think what we're boiling down to here is there's no bottom line right now. It's good to hear that you guys are being allowed back into to have some type of say into this whole system. And I know you guys have been fighting for that for a long time.
I just want to say, yeah, we were. The judge actually gave us that time. He says, I am going to allow you to the coalition, the amici, to object once the draft agreement has been presented to the public. So, and that was something that it wasn't legally required, but I'm glad that he gave it to us so that we can let all the parties know, because we weren't able to talk to all the parties through the last 3 years of negotiating, where our thoughts are collectively coming from all of the input that we've had from, because we have a team of those who signed the confidentiality agreement. It's much greater than just myself.
Sure.
And I can't remember exactly how many members we have, but they have all provided us input, and they've all stuck to their guns and followed that confidentiality agreement.
Wow. You guys have done great work, and I'm sure you'll continue to do great work. For that, I thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure being here.
Thank you. Guys, gals, we're going to wrap it up right here. If you can help out Tony and his cause, really all of our cause, or sportsmen's cause, sportswomen's cause, his website link is down below in the description. Go there, check it out. Also, I'm going to take the maps that you gave me. I'll have them up on my Facebook tomorrow. My Facebook link is down below as well. Take a look. If you got any questions, reach out to the people that know. Don't reach out to me. I'm going to point you in this guy's direction if you do, because these guys know a lot more about it than I do. I'm just happy to be here and be the medium for you. So
I appreciate it, Chris. I believe I can get a link of this. This is recorded.
It's right on YouTube. It'll be on YouTube as soon as we're done.
We'll link up to it. That's probably the best way to send
Sure.
questions to me, unless you know my email address. You can send it that way. Many of you know my phone number. It's on the coalition's website. It's
on the website.
So reach out.
Don't send them weird things at 3 in the morning.
I got a full-time job too, so if I'm
Right.
late getting back, I
Right.
apologize. But yeah, this is for all of us. This is. I mean, like I said, I'm 100% volunteer, and this is just for recreational anglers that we're trying to make sure that it's a fairly shared resource for us all.
That's just it. Let's find a way for everybody to have a good, happy piece in this whole pie.
Yeah. Thanks again, Chris.
Oh, you're welcome. Everybody, we're going to sign off right there. We'll see you next, we'll see you next Thursday.